Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I thought I was heading to a quiet mountain weekend with my family until we pulled up to our cabin and found strangers grilling on my deck, claiming they'd rented it. What started as confusion turned into a chilling discovery. My home had been stolen, without me ever leaving. I hadn't planned to go up to the lake that weekend. My wife and I had just finished a brutal 2-week project at work. Our daughter's school fundraiser had run us both ragged, and the idea of escaping to the cabin, even just for a couple days, felt like the only way to breathe again. So, on a quiet Friday afternoon, we packed the SUV, loaded up the dog, and hit the road for what was supposed to be a calm private weekend in the mountains. The lake was still half frozen on the north edge, but down where our property sat, spring had already arrived. The road curved past the pines just the way I remembered it. That familiar gravel crunch under the tires, the warm light catching on the water like a postcard. But as we turned the final bend toward the cabin, something immediately felt off. There were 2 unfamiliar cars parked along the gravel shoulder, a gray Toyota Highlander and a Jeep with out-of-state plates. At first, I figured it might be hikers. People sometimes parked near the public trailhead down the road and wandered a little too far, but my stomach started to twist the closer we got. Then I saw smoke. Not the bad kind, grill smoke. Something was sizzling behind the cabin, and loud pop music was echoing through the trees like a frat party in Aspen. When I pulled up next to the house, I slammed the brakes so hard my wife's coffee sloshed out of her mug. There were strangers lounging in lawn chairs on our deck. I'm not exaggerating, full-on strangers. One guy with sunglasses and no shirt flipping burgers on my grill. A teenage girl in a bikini taking selfies near the edge of our dock. Someone else was walking barefoot into the cabin holding a glass of rosé. Who the hell are these people? My wife said before I could even put the car in park. I got out of the SUV like I'd just caught burglars mid-heist. "Hey!" I shouted, marching toward the deck. "What the hell is going on here?" They looked up like I was the problem. A middle-aged woman in a sun hat slowly stood up and walked over with a calm, vaguely annoyed look, like I'd just interrupted her yoga session. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice sweet and clipped. "Yeah, you can tell me what you're doing on my property," I snapped. The shirtless guy turned from the grill and muttered, we're renting it?" Through the HOA. "Renting what?" I asked, my voice turning hard. The woman pulled a folded sheet of paper from a plastic folder and handed it to me like a parking pass. "Here, we have the lease agreement, paid in full through Sunday. Talk to the HOA if there's a problem." I stared at the paper, reading the bold header, Short-Term Occupancy Agreement, Silver Echo Shores HOA. Beneath that was a printed image of my cabin, my actual cabin, in a contract for 1 week, signed by someone named Karen Stanton. I blinked. This is a mistake. This cabin isn't part of the HOA. I own this place. It's my name on the title, not Karen's, not the HOA's. You're trespassing. The woman crossed her arms. "Look, I don't know what your issue is, but we booked this through official channels, paid good money for it. You need to call your HOA." I took a deep breath, trying not to explode. "I don't have an HOA. I'm not a member. This property has never been under their jurisdiction. This is my private land, and no one had the right to rent it." A young guy stepped onto the deck holding a plate of food. "Yo, is this guy serious? He says we're on his land." Another one chimed in from inside. "Karen said the owner moved away and doesn't come up here anymore." My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Listen to me carefully," I said, holding the lease in one hand and my phone in the other. "You are trespassing. I don't care what you were told. I'm calling the police right now." The sun hat lady narrowed her eyes. "You do that. But we're not leaving without a refund. You want to yell at someone? Talk to Karen. We have kids with us." "Then you shouldn't have trusted a stranger to rent you someone else's home," I snapped. I turned on my phone camera and began filming, capturing the cars, the people, the food, the open doors, the damn Bluetooth speaker blasting Sweet Caroline. I panned to the lease, the signature at the bottom. My hand was shaking from a mix of fury and disbelief. My wife and daughter had stayed in the car. I looked back and saw my little girl's face pressed to the window, confused and scared. I made the call to the county sheriff's office with my voice flat and deliberate. "Yes, I need to report an active trespassing situation. My private residence has been illegally rented out without my permission. I have people inside my home right now. I need a unit dispatched immediately." The dispatcher took my information. ETA 25 minutes. I stepped back and leaned on the hood of my SUV, staring at the party still happening in my backyard like I was the one ruining their vacation. No cameras, no alerts, no warning. Just a bunch of strangers partying in my home, all because someone decided that my absence meant it was up for grabs. They'd made a mistake, and someone, Karen, was about to find out just how big. The 25 minutes between my call and the arrival of the deputies felt like an eternity. I stood near the SUV, arms crossed, staring down a lawn full of people who alternated between pretending I wasn't there and glaring at me like I was ruining their weekend. No one made any move to leave. No apologies. Just disbelief that the guy whose house they were in had the audacity to show up. My wife stayed in the car, trying to calm our daughter down. I could see her shaking her head, her face pale. She mouthed, "Are they really not leaving?" I shook my head back. The answer was no. A man in a polo shirt approached me again, trying to sound reasonable. "Look," he said, hands raised. "We didn't know, all right? Karen handled all of it. We just wanted a weekend getaway. We're not trying to cause trouble." "You're in my house," I said, slow and quiet. "That is the definition of trouble." He didn't reply, just walked back to the grill, muttering something to the others. When the first sheriff's vehicle pulled in, a wave of relief hit me, but it was short-lived. 2 deputies stepped out, one older and relaxed, the other younger, looking like he just came off traffic duty. They took a quick glance around and walked toward me. "You the property owner?" the older one asked. "I am," I replied, handing him my ID, title deed copy, and a manila folder I'd kept in the glove box ever since we bought the place. "Name's Nate Bowen. This is my property. I haven't been here in a few months, and I just showed up to find people I've never seen before cooking on my grill and sleeping in my beds." The deputy glanced over his shoulder. "They say they rented it from your HOA. I don't have an HOA. Never did. This place is just outside their borders." I confirmed it before I bought the land. The younger deputy was already asking one of the renters questions while the older one flipped through my documents. I watched as the woman in the sun hat pulled out her own folder and started showing their side. "They have a lease," he said. "Forged," I replied. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't give permission. I don't lease my property ever." "All right, let's take a look." I walked with him over to their little setup. Someone had the audacity to bring folding tables. There were drinks, opened bags of chips, someone's towel drying on my porch rail. The woman handed the deputy her lease, a printed document on official-looking HOA letterhead, complete with a barcode, space for driver's license, and a large signature at the bottom. Karen Stanton, President, Silver Echo Shores HOA. I felt like I was looking at some bureaucratic fever dream. The deputy scanned it and frowned. "Looks legit on the surface. HOA header, a QR code. Says the house is lot 31. "My cabin doesn't have a lot number," I interrupted. "This is private property, never subdivided, never part of a planned unit development. Look at my deed. It's an original tract from the 50s. And look," I reached into my folder and pulled out a color map from the county website. "Here's the boundary line. HOA ends at lot 29. I'm a quarter mile outside of that." The deputy studied it. "And you said you never leased this?" "I live in Denver. We come up when we can. No one has permission to be here." "That contract is fraud." The woman with the lease had overheard. "Excuse me, are you saying we're the criminals here? We rented this in good faith." The older deputy turned to her. "Ma'am, calm down. We understand this may be a misunderstanding, but we need to determine if this lease was legally authorized by the property owner." I added, "And I'd like everyone off my property immediately. I have full legal documentation. I want them out." The renters looked uneasy now. One of the teenagers picked up their phone and started recording, no doubt thinking this would go viral under some angry homeowner tag. The younger deputy returned with a camera in hand. "Sir," he said to me, "we've documented the scene, including all individuals and their statements. What do you want to do right now?" "I want them gone," I said. "They can take their things and leave. If they have a problem with their refund, they can take it up with Karen Stanton." The shirtless grill guy didn't take that well. "We're not going anywhere. We paid $2,000. We have kids here. We're not being kicked out because this guy showed up late." "Late?" I barked. "You broke into my house. You weren't using it." The older deputy held up his hand. "All right, enough. Sir, you've made your ownership clear, and if what you're saying checks out, and it looks like it does, we need to ask these folks to vacate the premises." The woman finally broke. Karen promised it was hers to lease. The deputy looked at her. Did she say she owned it? She said she managed it, that it belonged to the HOA and the original owner hadn't shown up in months. My teeth clenched. So her plan was to rent out my cabin as long as I didn't notice? Apparently. Within the hour, the group was packing. They weren't happy, but the deputies made it clear, stay, and it's trespassing. Charges would follow. Some tried to argue. Others apologized. A few gave me long looks like I had just evicted them from paradise. As they packed their things, I filmed again, quietly this time. I captured the license plates, the trash, the bags. I wanted records. I wanted everything. When the cars finally pulled away and the last cooler was loaded, I turned to the older deputy. I want to press charges, I said. He nodded. You'll want to come down to the station, file a formal complaint. If that lease is forged, we're talking about fraud, criminal trespass, maybe more. I'll be there in an hour. He gave me a card. And bring that lease copy with you. I looked at the now empty deck, my trashed yard, the smoldering coals in the grill I hadn't lit in months. This was just getting started. The sheriff's station was a 30-minute drive back toward the main highway. I left my wife and daughter in a nearby diner with a slice of blueberry pie and a promise I'd be back soon. They'd had enough of this circus already. I needed to be the one who went in, filed the report, and made damn sure someone paid for what had happened. The station was a modest brick building with an American flag out front and a barely functioning vending machine humming in the lobby. The same older deputy who'd helped me at the cabin met me at the front desk with a firm handshake and led me to a small interview room. All right, Mr. Bowen, he said, pulling out a form. Let's get this on record. I handed over everything, copies of the forged lease, my deed, property maps, photos of the scene, and the footage I'd taken. I even included a screenshot of the calendar on the fridge in my Denver house, showing the date we'd planned the trip, just to reinforce how spontaneous this weekend had been. The deputy went through the documents, slowly, methodically, highlighting key points, jotting notes in the margins. He didn't say much at first, just the occasional, or, well, that's interesting. But when he got to the lease page signed by Karen Stanton, he stopped and looked up. You said you never gave this woman access to your property? Never, I said. I know who she is, in the sense that she's president of the HOA next door, but we're not part of that HOA. Never have been. I checked it before I even bought the place. She's not listed as a property manager, caretaker, or trustee for the land. Nope, no legal relationship whatsoever. He nodded. Then we're dealing with something serious here. This isn't a misunderstanding. Glad someone's saying it out loud, I muttered. He took a deep breath and sat back. All right. We'll start with criminal trespass and fraud. If that lease was signed and money changed hands under false pretenses, we're potentially looking at wire fraud and identity misrepresentation too. My blood pressure spiked just hearing it said like that. So what's next? We'll get in contact with Karen Stanton. Ask her to come in for a formal interview. I leaned forward. You're assuming she's still in the county? He raised an eyebrow. She wasn't answering calls, her office was locked, and one of the renters said Karen told them I'd moved away. That doesn't sound like someone who plans on sticking around. The deputy's jaw tightened. We'll put out a countywide BOLO just in case. If she's still around, we'll find her. I filed the formal complaint, signed everything, and left the station feeling like I'd just walked out of a courtroom. But it wasn't over. Not even close. As I drove back to the cabin, I kept thinking about all the little things that suddenly didn't sit right. That time last year when I came up and the back window was unlatched. The faint smell of cologne in the bedroom once. The missing bottle of bourbon I chalked up to forgetfulness. Had this been going on longer than I thought? When I got back to the house, the light was starting to fade. My wife and daughter were on the deck, sipping tea, wrapped in blankets. They looked tired, but relieved. Everything filed? She asked. Yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. They're treating it as fraud. Looking for Karen now. Good, she said flatly. You're not going to like this. She stood and led me inside. The place was a mess, more than I'd thought at first. Drawers had been opened, not just in the kitchen, but in the bedrooms too. One of my old photo albums was sitting on the floor by the couch, like someone had been flipping through it casually. A bathroom drawer had a stranger's toothbrush in it. My daughter's bed had been slept in, still warm. I clenched my jaw. I want this place gutted, cleaned top to bottom. Wait, she said, pointing at a side table by the bookshelf. Did you leave that drawer open last time? Why? She crouched and pointed toward the back of the drawer, where a small metal latch had been pushed up. It led to the wiring tunnel behind the wall heater, something I'd sealed up years ago after a raccoon incident. I pulled the panel aside. Inside, taped to the wood beam, was a tiny black box with a red LED. A small camera lens stared back at me. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just slowly reached in and disconnected it. A long black wire trailed down and out of sight behind the drywall. I followed it through the crawl space and found it connected to a cellular uplink module, tucked discreetly into the HVAC closet, wired into a power outlet that had always looked normal. It was a damn surveillance setup. Someone had been watching the inside of my home. I stood up too fast and hit my head on the water heater. Didn't care. My heart was pounding like a drum solo. Karen hadn't just stolen access to the house. She'd been inside, filmed, wired it, maybe even monitored guests. When I told my wife, she sat down hard on the edge of the bed and just stared at the floor. "She's a psycho," she whispered. "I'm calling the detective," I said. This just became something much bigger. I dialed immediately and reported the hidden camera. They sent an evidence technician that night to retrieve it. He confirmed what I already suspected. It wasn't a home security camera. It was professionally installed, concealed, and had been operational within the last few weeks. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "Whoever did this knew what they were doing, and they weren't expecting you back this weekend." Neither was I. The technician left around 10 p.m., taking the camera, uplink module, and every trace of wiring with him. He promised to expedite the report, but I knew how these things worked. It could be days before we got anything conclusive. Still, I didn't plan on waiting. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house put me on edge. I kept checking the motion detectors I'd rearmed, reviewing exterior camera feeds from my phone even though I knew no one was dumb enough to come back now. My wife tried to sleep, but I could hear her tossing and turning through the wall. Our daughter curled up in the guest room with the dog and refused to close the door. None of us felt safe. By sunrise, I was already on the phone with my lawyer. Her name was Diana Nix, and I'd used her firm years ago for a dispute with a shady contractor. She was sharp, unforgiving, and exactly who I needed. When I explained the situation, she didn't waste time with platitudes. "She used your property as a revenue stream. She impersonated authority she didn't have. She may have conducted illegal surveillance. This isn't just civil, it's criminal. I want her buried," I said. "You'll have to get in line," Diana replied dryly. "You're probably not the only one." That got my attention. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say I've heard her name before." While she started compiling a case, I drove back into town to file a supplemental police report with the new evidence: surveillance, concealed equipment, and unlawful access to utilities. This time, I was met by a plainclothes detective named Ramos, who was already reviewing my earlier complaint. He had a stack of printed screenshots from the interior camera I'd surrendered. The feed, he told me, had been saved to an encrypted cloud server registered under a burner email address. But the technician had pulled the metadata, timestamps, IPs, even partial location tags. Someone was logging in from out of state, Ramos said, pointing to a log from a Starbucks in Phoenix. "Same user checked in 2 days ago. Then again yesterday. We're working on a subpoena." "Phoenix?" I asked. "You think she ran?" "She hasn't been seen at her residence in 3 days. HOA office has been closed all week. Her number routes straight to voicemail. Mailbox is full. She's in the wind." That was the moment it shifted from bizarre to personal. "You're telling me she bailed?" "Most likely. We've got a BOLO out for her vehicle. Colorado plates, black Audi Q5, cracked left taillight, roof rack. If she tries to leave the state again, we'll know." That again caught me. Again, Ramos looked up from the file. "We pinged her license plate at a traffic cam in New Mexico early this morning. She didn't get far. Highway Patrol stopped her outside of Winslow, claimed she was on her way to visit family. Once her name popped in the system, she got flagged for questioning." "Was she arrested?" "Number not yet, but she's being brought back under detainment for questioning. Her car's being searched." I nodded slowly. "Good." 2 hours later, I got the call. They'd found more than just camping gear and grocery bags in her SUV. In a locked plastic file box behind the rear seats, police recovered a folder of short-term lease agreements, all signed under the HOA name, none of them legitimate. A notepad filled with addresses, including mine, with handwritten notes like "usually empty," "clean up after kids," and "send laundry to Glenwood." A USB stick loaded with interior photos of multiple homes, including mine, some taken from inside, bedrooms and bathrooms. A roll of duplicate keys, color-coded, one of which matched my front door. Karen Stanton had been running a rental scam. Not just with my cabin, at least 4 other properties appeared to be involved, all of them sitting just outside HOA jurisdiction, all of them owned by people who rarely used them, all of them likely monitored and accessed without consent. Ramos told me flatly, she treated other people's homes like a vacation inventory. I asked if they were charging her yet. We're building the case, but this is bigger than trespassing now. We're talking about fraud, unlawful entry, misuse of private information, surveillance, maybe even interstate wire crimes depending on how she collected payments. What about the HOA? That's next. If they knew, or even looked the other way, we may be dealing with organizational negligence or complicity. I didn't even wait to hang up before calling Diana. She was already ahead of me. I want their heads, I said. Oh, don't worry, she replied. The HOA board is getting served next week. And if even one of them knew about this and didn't speak up, we'll go after them personally. The line was silent for a beat. Then she added, and Nate. You're not going to believe this. What? One of my paralegals just found something. The HOA's bylaws, the ones Karen always references in their documents. They're copied, word for word, from another HOA downstate. She never registered the organization properly with the county. It's not even legally constituted. I blinked. So, Silver Echo Shores HOA isn't real. Not in the legal sense. It's a shell. A very loud, very entitled shell. The silence in my car was heavier than it should have been. It wasn't just that Karen had stolen my house. She'd built an empire on a lie. And now it was crumbling. I didn't even make it back to the cabin before local news broke the story. HOA president detained in multi-property fraud ring, read the headline on the diner's wall-mounted TV as I stopped in to pick up coffee. The local anchor looked smug as he read off details I hadn't even known were public yet. They were quoting law enforcement sources, listing neighborhoods, estimating the damages in the 6 figures. By the time I got back to the house, my wife already had her phone buzzing nonstop. 3 reporters have called me, she said, holding it up. One even asked if they could tour the house. Tell them I've got a rake and no problem using it, I muttered, slamming the door behind me. That afternoon, a detective from another county called to inform me that Karen's scam stretched across multiple mountain communities. Some properties were owned by snowbirds who hadn't returned in years. Others belonged to trust or out-of-state corporations. Most didn't even know they'd been violated. We were the first to catch it in the act. Karen had apparently used her phony HOA authority to imply she had caretaker rights. Some homeowners receiving invoices or notices about security patrols or property compliance had just paid the fees without question. Those funds, of course, were pocketed. What made me sick was that some of the renters thought they were buying timeshares. A few had been promised renewable seasonal access. One family drove up from Nevada thinking the place was theirs for the summer. They brought bunk beds. The DA's office confirmed Karen was being formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, breaking and entering, wire fraud, unlawful surveillance, and identity misrepresentation. Bond was denied. She'd be held pending trial. They were now interviewing former HOA volunteers who might have assisted her, knowingly or not. Meanwhile, Diana, my lawyer, wasn't wasting any time. We're filing a civil suit this week, she told me. Not just against Karen personally, but against everyone who helped her run this fake HOA. Board members, bookkeepers, rental processors. We've already subpoenaed their emails. Anything promising? I asked. Oh yes, she said, with a tone that gave me chills. We found messages where Karen literally told one assistant, quote, keep the owner off my back. Tell them it's a clerical error if they ask why people are staying there. I stared at the wall for a second. How deep does this go? She was laundering money through a property compliance firm that doesn't exist. We traced 3 fake bank accounts under aliases. The IRS is now involved. That night, I walked out onto the deck of the cabin, stared at the treetops, and tried to let the stillness calm me. But the stillness felt false. Like someone had stolen the soul of this place and left behind a stage set of my life. My daughter joined me. Are we going to sell this place? She asked quietly. I shook my head. Not a chance. I'm not letting her scare us off. But it feels gross now. I knew what she meant. I could still smell someone else's fabric softener in the sheets. The fridge had leftover juice boxes I never bought. Even the logs in the fireplace had been rearranged. But I also knew something else. This wasn't over. The next morning, I got a certified letter. It was from the Silver Echo Shores HOA, or rather what was left of it. The letter was printed on the usual cheap ivory stationery, still stamped with their gaudy gold emblem. But what caught my attention wasn't the demand for a community impact restoration fee, a 5-figure amount that they now claimed was owed to offset the embarrassment and logistical disruption caused by the public incident. It was the name signed. At the bottom, Interim President Tom Hartley, the same smug, middle-aged man I remembered from one of the HOA barbecues years ago, the one who used to flirt with Karen at board meetings and talk about bylaws like they were scripture. He ended the letter with, "Please be advised that failure to pay this restitution may result in further legal action. We expect you to show good faith as a member of our community." I stared at the words for a solid minute before laughing out loud. "Good faith?" I said aloud, shaking my head. They still thought this game was theirs. I didn't bother calling Tom Hartley. I wanted the record straight and permanent, so I handed the letter to Diana, scanned a copy for my own files, and had my reply couriered back by noon. In it, I stated in legal terms what I really wanted to say. I am not, and never have been, a member of your HOA. Your organization has no jurisdiction over my land, no authority to collect fees, and no standing to issue threats. And then I called a local title attorney just to double-check the original deed. Turns out the HOA had filed a boundary compliance claim 6 months ago, claiming my parcel was within their extended oversight zone, a document I'd never seen. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It's legal gibberish," the attorney said. "It's meaningless unless you respond to it, but it does raise eyebrows in court, makes it seem like there's a dispute, even when there isn't." So that was the game now. Create the illusion of entitlement, force negotiation, drag it into bureaucracy. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. The next day, I personally visited the county recorder's office with a file folder so fat it could bench press a pickup. Ownership titles, survey plats, legal correspondence, police reports, signed arrest affidavits, and pictures of the 4 rent ads Karen had posted using my address. The clerk raised an eyebrow when I laid it down. "You filing a counterclaim?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. I requested a formal legal declaration of jurisdictional separation, a notarized document confirming my parcel is not, and has never been, under HOA authority, with copies to be served to both the county and any entities operating as HOAs within 2 miles. When I left, I noticed 2 of Karen's former board members sitting in a bench outside the county office. They were pale, sweaty, arguing under their breath. One of them saw me and quickly looked away. By the weekend, things escalated again. An unmarked SUV pulled up to the cabin mid-morning. 2 men in business suits and utility vests stepped out, walked directly to the power box, and started inspecting it without knocking. I came out with my phone in hand. "Can I help you?" They flashed badges. Mountain State Infrastructure Authority. Except I'd never heard of such a department. "We're conducting a compliance inspection," one of them said flatly. "We received a report of unsafe modifications made to the power line during recent tenant stays." I laughed. "Funny, I'm the owner and I didn't report anything." They hesitated. One of them muttered something into a radio. Then I asked to see their work order. They refused, so I started filming. "I suggest you leave now," I said, still recording. "I've got county law enforcement on speed dial." They got back into the SUV and drove off without another word. I called the sheriff immediately. Turns out there's no such agency. Deputies pulled footage from nearby gas stations, confirmed the license plate, and discovered the vehicle had been rented under a fake name just the day before. We had imposters now, people trying to bluff their way onto my land with badges and fake credentials. That was a new level. Later that night, Diana called again. "They're desperate," she said. "They know Karen's going down, and they're trying to scare you, push you into a settlement, or make you back off. It's textbook HOA damage control, just on steroids." We weren't backing off. That weekend, I installed motion-triggered spotlights, signed a service contract with a professional security company, and placed bright red aluminum signs along the road. Private property, no trespassing, not affiliated with HOA. And just for fun, I added, trespassers will be photographed, recorded, and turned into memes. By Sunday, I had a knock at the door. A woman in her late 50s, polite, nervous, holding a manila folder. She introduced herself as Marcia, a former HOA treasurer. I wanted to apologize, she said. I didn't know it was going this far. I let her talk. She told me how Karen had manipulated the board, claiming that certain properties were unclaimed or underutilized, how she used fake addresses to route payments, how she altered accounting software so the rental income didn't show up in official reports. Some of us tried to quit, she said. But Karen told us if we spoke out, we'd be liable for fraud too. She said she'd frame us as co-conspirators. I asked her if she'd testify. She nodded. I'll do it, she said. I just want this nightmare to end. I looked at her and realized, for the first time since this mess began, the tide was turning. The deposition took place in a glass-walled room at the county courthouse annex with 2 deputies posted outside. Marcia looked smaller in person, more fragile than I remembered, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded her notes. But when she started speaking, her voice didn't waver. She gave them everything. The emails Karen had forwarded her, asking to massage the board minutes. A spreadsheet with 2 sets of financials, one for internal use and one for compliance. Voice memos where Karen talked about getting rid of entitled owners who don't use their cabins anyway. She described how Karen had coerced cooperation, late-night calls, threats about civil liability, constant paranoia about being audited, and the most damning of all, a private Dropbox folder Karen had shared with the inner circle titled Quiet Owners, full of photos and data on people's usage patterns, vehicle registrations, and even security system logs. Diana was present for the whole thing, her pen never stopping. When it ended, she turned to the county attorney and said, "We'll be submitting this under Rule 36 as a foundational admission." That afternoon, the sheriff's office executed 2 more search warrants, one for the fake security firm Karen had hired and one for Tom Hartley's house. Tom didn't answer the door, but you know who did? His wife. She opened it just long enough to scream, "We don't know anything," before slamming it shut. Deputies broke it down 10 minutes later. They found printed maps of properties marked with red circles, a burner phone with encrypted messages, and, my personal favorite, a trophy plaque on the shelf that read, President of the Year, Silver Echo Shores HOA. It looked like it had been ordered online. Back at my cabin, the fallout was fast and chaotic. The few remaining HOA loyalists tried to distance themselves. One of them emailed me an apology, saying he thought the whole thing was a neighborhood enhancement project gone too far. Nice spin. The local news ran a full segment that night. My property was blurred out, but the headline wasn't. HOA fraud scheme exposed. Board members facing criminal trials. I got texts from friends I hadn't heard from in years. My uncle sent me a whiskey basket. The mayor's assistant left a voicemail saying she deeply regretted the stress this must have caused and asked if I'd considered joining a community oversight subcommittee. I didn't call her back. But the next day, I did attend a public town hall where they opened the floor to impacted residents. The room was packed. Dozens of people stood up and shared their stories. Rental scams, billing confusion, threats of fines for non-existent infractions. Then I stood. "My name is Daniel Briggs," I said. "I own my home. I pay my taxes. I never joined any HOA." But that didn't stop them from trying to take what was mine. They forged signatures. They invaded my house. They terrorized my family. And when we fought back, they doubled down. The room was silent. And then someone clapped. Then more. Outside, a news van cornered me for a quote. I said they wanted to run this like a private kingdom. Now they're going to court like common criminals. But just when I thought we were close to the end, something shifted again. 3 days later, I received an official-looking envelope from a private civil firm based out of Phoenix. Inside was a lawsuit. Tom Hartley, acting on behalf of the Silver Echo Shores HOA, was suing me for defamation, intentional disruption of community governance, and reputational damages. They wanted monetary compensation, punitive damages, and a gag order placed on all further public statements. They were suing me. I stared at the paper, blinked, and laughed. Out loud. In the driveway. I called Diana. She was already ahead of it. "Good," she said. Let them try. She sounded almost excited. I don't know what kind of attorney Tom Hartley thought he'd hired, but the lawsuit they filed against me read like it was assembled by an intern with a grudge and access to ChatGPT. Pages of vague accusations, no hard facts, and a prayer for restorative relief. Whatever that was supposed to mean. Diana called it a civil tantrum in legalese. We countersued the next day. Not just a response, a full countersuit. Diana filed under 3 statutes: malicious prosecution, abuse of legal process, and civil conspiracy to defraud. We added a motion for summary dismissal of their claims and included all evidence from the criminal proceedings. Turns out trying to sue the guy you just framed, lied about, robbed, and stalked while he's being hailed on the news as a whistleblower isn't a great look. The judge scheduled the hearing fast. Not trial, just the initial hearing for dismissal and our countersuit. But the courtroom was packed. Reporters, residents, a few former HOA members, and even some of the renters Karen had misled were seated quietly along the wall. Tom showed up in a suit that didn't fit and sat stone-faced at the defense table. Karen was nowhere to be seen. She'd been moved from county jail to federal custody, awaiting sentencing. When the judge asked Diana to present our case, she didn't waste a second. With brutal clarity, she laid out the timeline of fraud, deception, surveillance, forged leases, unauthorized rentals, and the HOA's collapse. She submitted financial records, email threads, and Karen's own statements, tying Tom directly to the conspiracy. At one point, the judge leaned forward and asked, "Did the plaintiff knowingly submit forged documents to facilitate the rental of a property they did not own?" Diana answered, "Yes, Your Honor," repeatedly and profitably. That was it. The judge dismissed their entire claim with prejudice and approved our countersuit to proceed. He also issued an emergency order to freeze all HOA bank accounts still active under Tom's name. And, in a move that felt almost personal, he referred the case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges against Tom himself. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom to applause. Real applause, people shaking my hand. One guy offered to mow my lawn for free. A local blogger tried to give me a t-shirt that said, "Not today, Karen." But the real victory came 2 weeks later. Karen was sentenced. 15 years. No parole. The judge described her actions as a deeply premeditated, parasitic abuse of community trust. The courtroom transcript was brutal. Detailed accounts of her schemes, her surveillance network, and even jokes she'd made in private messages about monetizing absentee owners. She cried when they read the sentence, and then she was taken away in cuffs. We settled with the renters out of court just enough to make things right. Diana handled it all with precision. And Silver Echo Shores HOA dissolved, officially and legally. Assets seized, board dismantled, management licenses revoked. My countersuit ended with a settlement, enough to cover legal fees, damages, and a little extra to renovate the cabin. That brings us to now. There's a new gate around the property. A real one, industrial grade with coded access. I had a company install a new security system with motion detection, thermal cameras, and a server backup that I monitor from Denver. There are signs now too, not passive ones. Big, reflective, laser-cut aluminum. Private property not for rent, not HOA affiliated. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And another one right by the drive. Karen, this is still my house. Every time I pull up to that cabin now, it's peaceful. The birds are loud, the lake still reflects the pines, and no Bluetooth speaker is blaring top 40. It's mine again, and this time, nobody's taking it away.